Welcome to What in the World, a project initiated by Hungry for Life International. Today's podcast is titled Ukraine Update with Chad, and Jess will be interviewing Chad Martz. So grab your headphones, sit back, relax, and listen as we talk about his trips out east and what the current situation is in Ukraine.
Hello, and welcome back to another week of What in the World podcast, where we talk about all things global here at Hungry for Life. Today, we are getting a bit of an update from Ukraine and what's happening with Chad and Mary. So it's really late for Chad. So thanks for staying up again to talk. And we will fire through a few questions because I know people have been wanting to know how you guys are doing and what ministry has been like for you guys. So first of all, hello.
Hello, Jessica. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, Chad. Yeah, so we haven't been doing the lives every other week, but I think there's enough information to do a whole podcast on filling people in on what's been happening over the last, I would say, month. It's probably been a month since we've gotten a good update from you guys. So, first of all, I told you I'd save the how are you for the end, so I won't ask you right now. What's it been like day to day there right now? What's been the general feel?
The general feel is, I would say, people are starting to get a little bit used to what life is living in a war zone. I would say it's not that it's gotten any easier by any means. We have a lot of people who are returning. I think it's close to 3 million Ukrainians have started to return, but people are learning to live, because right at the very beginning you just didn't know how quickly Russia was going to be occupying different parts of the territory, how quickly it would be for them before they were at your front door, essentially. And now people, I think people are just getting a little bit more used to what it is, and it's been very difficult for a lot of refugees to be living in other countries and other cultures, and just really wanting to go home. Even if it's dangerous to do so. And there are still multiple missile attacks every single day. Air alarms are going off every day. And so the dangers are still there, but a lot of people want to return and are learning what it is to live, like I said, during this time of war.
So when you're saying people are returning, you don't mean conflict zones, do you? Or are some people going back to homes in conflict zones as well?
Yeah. Like some mayors ask for residents not to return, but some of these areas in the country have been liberated. So, for example, Russia never took over Kiev, but they still continue to fire rockets at the capital. But so people have started to return there, and there's still the risk of that. And there's people who are returning to the east side of the country. For example, we have the refugee who stays right beside us. She went back to her home in the east to see how things were because it was not occupied. But a rocket hit not too far away from where she was. So she obviously she left right away. And so we do have more people that are going back to seeing how their places are, for those who want to see if it's been damaged, whatever it might be. So you do have people who are returning to live that are closer to the conflict zones, and you're having people return to seeing how their homes are doing. And so, it's a tough one. It's just really hard to live away from your home. So it's driving more and more people to go back, even if it is closer to the conflict zones. People are still willing to take that risk to go back to live in their own place.
And where were most of these refugees?
Where they are located. Most of the people who are returning are from like the Kiev area and in and around it. That's where most people are returning to. There are some liberated cities in the east. But a lot of places, once Ukraine, if they liberate them, there's nothing left, because Russia's using more of a scorched earth tactic where it's just destroy everything in their path. So there are cities that still are habitable, and they're still trying to get their services. So, for example, in the Kharkiv area, people had been living for close to 3 months. Actually, it was 3 months in the subway system, because they didn't want to leave anywhere. They didn't have anywhere to go. They just lived in the subway system.
Whoa.
Thousands of people. And so the city had been trying to get the transportation up and running, so they needed to have them placed in another area so that they can start providing services within the cities so that people can start returning to it. However, because the war is so fluid, it's so hard to say. Russia advances in some places, they get pushed back in other places. They get into artillery range and they can fire upon the cities with artillery. So it's so fluid here with where is being attacked, where is it's safer to go to. So yeah, day to day it differs.
So these refugees had they crossed the border, and are they coming back into, or were they just kind of settling west? Were they in Hungary?
Yeah,
were
both.
they in okay?
Yeah, so a lot more, because they're the ones that are registered that leave the country. That's come back into the country was about 2 or 3 million that have come back into the country from Europe, and then of course the refugees who have or internally displaced people from the east coming here, yes, have returned home. So we're actually, last week was the first week that we have no refugees with us. And so that just kind of gives you a little bit of an idea that people are trying to start to return home or trying to find other options for themselves to live. But our home, actually, we don't have anybody in it as of right now, which is a little bit weird. My wife and child and I actually shared a lunch together, and I don't remember doing that since the war started. It was just us three.
Does that feel weird?
It felt it felt weird, but it felt good just to be able to have some personal time, because you have to take them when they come. Now, it's not to mean that we haven't had our opportunities where we're just by ourselves, but really our place is packed all the time. For any of the HFL staff that's come to visit or to be here to help out, they've experienced it. It's a constant. So today we actually got to enjoy a lunch together, which was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm happy for you three that you finally got a moment. Those dang HFL staff, they all just want to come and see you guys, and you're the boss. You can tell them no.
Yeah, it's true. I could tell them no.
Yeah, no, that's good. Can you I mean, you kind of did touch on this already, but I know a lot of people are asking what's the context of what's happening in Ukraine with the Russians? Like, you said they're advancing in some areas and then pulling back. Like, where exactly is the war at? It seems from our end like not a bit at a standstill, but like obviously not, as in they're not advancing. So can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, so Russia is taking like an approach like death by 1,000 cuts. So they throw a lot of their military personnel in and do slow advancements, but it's a great cost to both the Russian military and the Ukrainian military. So they are advancing, but if you want to take the scope of how much they've taken in terms of the country, I think there was a report that came out that Russia occupies 20% of Ukraine. It's a little bit misleading in the sense that in 2014, they took over parts of the East and Crimea, which was about 15%. So during the overall over 100 days, they've actually only advanced about 5 or 6% of the country since the war started over 100 days ago. So the biggest fighting is in the East right now. And that's what seems to be the goal is to capture the two, what we would call provinces. In Canada, we call them provinces. They want to capture all of those provinces for right now. And so, yes, Ukraine is holding them off. Some places they've been able to counterattack and to push them back, which is great. But Russians are advancing more than what Ukraine is pushing back at this stage. That's not counting where Ukraine was able to push Russia out of Kiev and their area there and push them right out of the north. But Russia, yes, is advancing, unfortunately, more than what Ukraine is able to push back. We just don't have the weapons to be able to fight this type of battle that's currently happening.
So I know you guys have done quite a few more trips since the last time we've talked, and I know you have quite a few stories. Like, can you shed a bit of light on A, where have you been, and B, what are some stories that you've come across that you might be willing to share?
Yeah, we've wanted to take the opportunity, since it's slowed down in terms of the amount of trucks receiving from the European Union into our Western warehouse. And I think it's a part of a question is about what are some of the difficulties, and I'll share about what those are, but we have moved more of our operation to the central part of the country in terms of warehousing and getting
Oh, okay.
food supplies out into different parts of the country from there. And so what this has given Mary and I is a bit more time to go and see things for ourselves, because it is so fluid. So for example, we traveled to one of the regions that's close to the front line, one of the main cities that's in the south part of the country between Odessa and Kherson. And about 50% of the entire city is left, and there's not a whole lot of children remaining there. But we wanted to go and see these places ourselves, but not just see it, but to also be a part of the partners who we've been working with and provide them encouragement. You got, for listeners, you got to understand, people have been staying, like, we're in the West here. We've only had 2 attacks in our province, as opposed to like hundreds of attacks in these provinces closer to where Russia's occupying. So our partners are under a lot of stress. They've stayed in these areas. They've continued to be the head of the spear, and we wanted to go and be a part with them to distribute food to people. So we can also see it ourselves, but also to encourage our partners that we're along with them and to bring that sort of encouragement. And so, yes, we have gone to the Far East, where it's been about 8 kilometers from the Russian border that we went to. We were in the south part, where we were in the major city that's next to where Russia has the closest city occupied. Well, it's not next door, but the next major city is there. And then up north, we've continued to travel into formerly occupied areas. So we want to continue to get out and to be a part of the distributions and encourage people who are receiving it, and also encourage those who have been doing this since the beginning of the war, going into some of these higher conflict areas.
So, and you don't have to go into it, but I think it's important for our listeners to understand the travesty and the devastation. And, like, we hear it when staff come back, we hear of a few different stories now and then, and it's devastating. Like, there's nothing that we just can't put ourselves in their shoes. And I think it's important for us to shed light on that, to keep the fire going under our butts here. Like, what are some of the things that the Ukrainians have experienced under Russian occupation? Like, obviously, houses being pillaged and bombed. What else can you shed some light on?
You can't walk down a street in these areas and not have somebody who's been dramatically affected. So I can even give you our most recent trip into a formerly occupied territory, where there's a lady standing at a bus stop, and we just came by to ask her for directions, because a lot of the signs are still taken down from when Russia was here. And we said we would just give her a ride, and she just shares how she was able to actually flee the area under fire from Russians, and crawling through fields and villages, and finally being able to get out and not eating for a few days. So that's just personally picked up. And then traveling to the church where the mass burials were, from where Ukrainians were tortured and killed. And we went to the church there that had this mass burial, and went upstairs and looked at the photos of this place, the ones that you've seen on TV, because it's from Bucha. And in the corner of this church is 3 people who are singing, and it's just because the acoustics are so amazing there. They came there to sing, and so we just asked them, where they're from, and they shared with us that they were actually in a group, and there's only 3 of them left. Their bass player was killed, and the rest of the group was able to flee into Europe, and they just came there to sing because that's all they have to do to try to keep their own morale up. You go then into the next community over, and it's actually not an impoverished area. It's like near a lake, but the houses are just completely destroyed. And you go and visit the one family that's still there, and they're sheepish and they're embarrassed and they're hurting almost because their house is the only one that has not been destroyed, and every house around them has been just torched to the ground. But yet they've got rockets that went right through their house and into their kitchen, and lots of their place has been destroyed. But they're even feeling guilty because their neighbors don't share the same fate. You have the guy that we walked to that his house is completely gone, and he's just beside himself. Like, where do you start? He built it with his own hands for 15 years. He built it, he saved, he built it with his own hands, and it's gone in 1 second. And then on our way out from these communities, we're stopping into a poor one, and you just stop there, and there's it's a pretty typical one where you have babushkas or grandmas sitting on the benches, and it's a pretty typical sign here. You would find it in any village. And we stop by and we start talking to them, and they start coming out, and now they start sharing their stories. They're under occupation. 250 tanks came through their village. The babushka showed us the bullet wound through her arm and was shot through by the side of her head. Another lady was, I don't know if it's sharing it here, but her husband was killed in front of her, then raped, and she hasn't come out of her house since. And so you start going through all these ladies' stories. It's one after the other, after the other, after the other. And they just caught a Russian military in one of the basements because they have not all been able to flee. They've actually been hiding. And so 1 week ago in this village, they were actually found a Russian soldier hiding out in one of these houses that had been destroyed. So the threats are still there. You have this incredible amount of pain and suffering. Even if I give you the example of the refugees who left from our house, like they're from the east. This girl who was staying here, she was an orphan and was adopted at the age of 2, and her mother passed away and then was readopted again. On the 24th, whatever day it was that Russia invaded, her and her boyfriend were going to be married, but because of the invasion, they couldn't. And so a few weeks later, the father-in-law said, you know what, as he's fighting on the front lines, you need to get out because Russia's coming through this way here, you need to get out. So she originally was on the eastern side of Donetsk, which in 2014 came under attack, so she fled from that. Then she was on the Ukrainian side, and now she had to flee again and came all the way over to our house. And they didn't know anybody. They just showed up to our place. They had, like, I think I had mentioned before, they had like a frozen chicken and some macaroni, and that's all they had with them, plus their dog. But they gave that to us as a gift, and they ended up staying with us for 2 months. And before we left on one of our trips, she came downstairs crying, and we asked what happened. She said, the only place that we had, our apartment in this eastern part of the country, was hit by a rocket and it's completely destroyed. So anything that they had left material-wise that they left was just completely gone. We came back from the trip, we came outside, they were here going out on a walk, and she's very emotional, and we asked her what had happened. She said that Russians had occupied an area where her friend lives, and she just found out that her friend had been raped multiple times by Russian soldiers, and this is her own friend, and this is the horrors that you're dealing with. And they finally get a break where they found some work up in Kiev area, and so they were going to be moving up there. So we just helped them for the first month of their rent, but the day that they were to leave, their dog that they had brought with them died. And so the day that they're going to leave, their dog passed away. So they buried him in our backyard, headed up to Kiev, and got settled in there for 2 days. And that's when a rocket attack hit just not too far from them. So there's, when you ask like what's the current situation here, it's traumatic for so many people. But like I said, they're learning to live with it, but are going to have years and years and years to process what they have gone through. And the thing is, you never know if Russia's going to be coming back through the areas where some of the people who have been freed from. So yes, it's a very tense and still difficult time here.
So what does that do where does that put you and Mary and the rest of your family? Like, you guys have been running this sprint now turned into, like, you're running at a sprint's pace, but you're running a marathon. Like, how are you guys managing, and with all that you have seen, all that you have heard, all you are carrying, like, how does that translate into the ministry and what you guys are doing and how you're able to sustain that?
Well, I mean, it's God driven. How do we take it? That's like probably a mixed response on how we take it and apply it. In terms of like motivation, yeah, you every trip you go on, every person that comes through, it just continues to fuel the fire to do the only thing that we know in terms of how do you combat this incredibly disgusting evil. I mean, I don't have the right words to describe it, or maybe even the Christian words to describe the things that are happening here, but the only way that we know how to best combat it is with the good that we can do, and to try to bring encouragement and to try to bear some of the burdens for people. And I didn't realize that that was such a pretty big component to most of the places that we're going to, or how freely people are willing to share their traumatic experience with you and just sit there with you for 10, 20, 30 minutes. They just want to share. And they thank you for bearing some of the burden with you, even though I get to come home to a house that hasn't been blown up, and yet they're in that exact situation. So how do you deal with it? You continue to press. You continue to press forward. There has been a change in terms of organization. So for us, we were able to hit the ground running the very day that this happened, and we've been able to keep this pace going this entire time. We are finding that there are a lot more organizations that are able to now finally get their systems, their networks, their food supplies into some of these major areas. So what we're doing is we're not having to get out as much food supplies to those same areas, because we're finding a lot of organizations are going into that. So strategically, we discussed it, and we don't need to double up in areas where there's other ones. So it's great. We're actually so excited that there's other organizations that are going out there and doing that.
Yeah, that's
but
awesome.
In some of the areas, people who are not able to get reached because they can't necessarily come to a distribution center, some of the elderly or the disabled, or and so we're looking at more of that. And again, into the conflict zones, because there's still not a lot of organizations that are going directly into the conflict zones because of how dangerous it is. And so we are focusing a lot more of our effort on that. However, even from our last trip after doing that food distribution, our partners received a call, and the week before they were like, no, we're doing pretty good. We haven't received a whole lot of calls. And on the way back from our distribution, they received a call that 200 refugees were going to be coming to a small community that's already caring for 60. And because of how fluid, how I was mentioning, how fluid the war is, the Ukrainian army is trying to remove and get as many civilians out as they can, because that prohibits Ukrainians from fighting fully in response to what Russia's doing. And so when you get a large amount of people coming and you could barely care for 60 refugees in itself, and they're calling you, we need a lot of food, blankets, supplies. Okay, well, it just turned so quickly that a week ago we didn't need to bring in. Well, now we need to send a 20-foot or 40-foot truck up to them full of supplies so that they have access to it. So it's always moving all the time, but our main focus is getting into the hard, difficult areas right now.
Cool. You already answered my next question, which was how has implementation changed or evolved, I should say. And I'm really happy to hear that there's more organizations who are able to get in and bring aid and so you guys don't feel like the lone soldiers out there, and you're able to focus on areas where other people can't reach. So that's really cool. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges these days?
There's a multiple, but recently it's been the fuel shortages in the country. So when the war first broke out, there actually so gas was actually quite difficult to get at the very beginning, but diesel wasn't much of an issue. And at the very beginning, because we anticipated that we would run out of fuel right away, so we purchased a large quantity of fuel and had it stored here. And so we ran out of that surplus of fuel probably about a month ago, but that's also when diesel started becoming really complicated to get. Russia had targeted our 4 different major depots of fuel, and with the blockage of the Black Sea, typically Ukraine would get tankers in to Odessa, but they can't do so. So the only way to get it now is through European Union, but it's been taken a long time to replenish. So we've had to be very creative in terms of getting fuel and having enough fuel for the different vehicles, which is why we moved also our major warehouse is now more out of the central part of the country. So we don't have to utilize as much fuel, plus the factories and warehouses that we are purchasing more of the mass quantities is that. Give you another example too, which is another difficulty. Commodities like food, supplies, they could be easy to get at one stage, and then the next week it's like really difficult or very expensive. For example, we purchased 20 tons of salt, and within a week, so let's say we purchase it for like 50 cents a kilogram for salt, and but within that week, Russia bombed the factory that produced it in the east, and so actually the factory that we purchased it from called us back to ask if they could purchase back the salt at double the price, and we were starting to get a lot of calls to buy back did I say rice? It was supposed to be salt.
No, I think
to purchase salt. Yeah, to purchase back salt. And I mean, we didn't do it because salt's a major preservative for people, and so we kept it. But this is how, like, at one stage something can be very easy to get, and then at the next stage it's not. And so you're always having to adapt. You're always having to adjust. And so, yeah, that's some of the major difficulties right now is the fuel situation within the country.
So what do you mean by creative ways? What kind of creative ways have you gotten fuel?
So we've had transportation vehicles come in from Holland bringing food supplies, but what we've asked them to do is to fill up on the Hungarian side. So when they came across, we had this large drum, about 1,000 liter. And so what we did is that we took like 600 liters of fuel from the truck. And so when it goes back to the Hungarian side, it can fill itself back up and then go to Holland. And then we can utilize that fuel for the vehicles that need it on our side to get it across the country. So that's how we've been doing it. And then obviously we have different connections with gas stations and people around the country that also have stored up fuel for their businesses that we have access to. So these are some of the creative ways that we've been able to kind of overcome this one issue, which, I mean, if we were looking at all the issues together, there's been a lot of things that we've overcome, but this is more of the current one.
How tired is everyone feeling these days? Like, is everyone, I feel like for the first little while, adrenaline, so to speak, will take you so far, but like I'm speaking in the sense of all the Ukrainians. Like, I know you guys are exceptionally tired as well, but like, is the mood of everybody just like so tired, so done, or is it still like, hey, like, let's rally, let's fight, let's, like, what is it?
Yeah, so there's like probably 3 different parts. There's like military, there's civilians, and then how we're feeling.
Let's go through all 3.
Yeah, so military depends on where you're talking to, and we have a lot of our connections are within the military as well too. So we're receiving direct information on how people are doing and how they're doing. And yeah, in some areas they're quite encouraged because they've been able to repel Russian troops. In other areas, they're quite discouraged because they don't have the weapons to be able to do the things that they want to do. There are a lot of deaths. There's the type of warfare that's happening right now, which is a lot more open field and artillery and tank fighting, is it's costing a lot of lives on both sides. So you're having a lot more funerals in the communities here, I mean, daily. And so it's heart-wrenching. It's heart-wrenching when you have somebody who volunteers, who's got 2 young kids, who's fighting in the front lines, and then you're having a funeral for them in the community. And this is happening, all the time. So yes, it's weighing on people. People who are outside the country are tired of being outside the country and want to come back. We experience it with our own family members, which is why you're seeing people come back in droves. So is the resolve still there to fight? Absolutely. I mean, the continued atrocities that are happening here in this country, this unified effort within the civilian population, those who are volunteering, those who are providing aid, those who are providing military service on the front line, it's unified. I mean, they'll fight with sticks, they'll fight with it doesn't matter. There's no exit for people. There's only death or living under Russian rule. And so there's not a whole lot of options. Like myself, I can leave. Our partners who are here, who are men who have their families in Europe, they can't leave. This is it for them. There's no other options. And so, overall, people are tired. They're exhausted. Our partners are exhausted. But you learn to live within that exhaustion because there's no other choice. There's no taking the foot off the gas pedal here. It's life and death stuff that's happening. And so you just learn to live within the exhaustion that's here, and you take those breaks when you can, like we did for lunch today. Like you take them and you're grateful for those times. But you just learn. You just learn to live within the craziness that's here.
That's exhausting. How are you?
Yeah, it's not the same. It's not the same for Mary and I since the first 2 months of the war. That's not a sustainable sleeping 2-3 hours. You just can't keep going with it. But we don't have as many responsibilities on the home front in terms of refugees coming through our door and us trying to get them to Europe or finding other places for them. We were able to be a little bit more focused on our efforts, and so. It hasn't been as extreme as it was in the first 2 months, so that's good. Doesn't mean that we're not busy every day. No, it's every day, and there's always things that you need to be able to do, but you just learn to live within it.
What would be the best way that people? I ask you this every time because I don't know if it changes, but what would be the best way for people to support? Two sides. One, specifically you and Mary and Tatiana, and 2, the ministry as a whole.
I don't take encouragements lightly. Encouragements to us are great. Dropping a note, dropping a message over Facebook, Instagram, whatever, email. Those are actually quite appreciative. It's encouraging to hear people who are still willing to encourage us in that way. Obviously, prayer, we need it. We're making decisions all the time that are quite complicated decisions. And so I'm not trying to give just a stock answer, but that's the reality of it. We need the prayer to continue to sustain and for wisdom on how to best utilize the resources that we do have here and to the areas that need it the most. And so that would be another an encouragement, though, because I don't see what's going on in media wise. From my responsibilities, I mean, I haven't done any media for quite some time, and that's totally fine. But that also shows me that it's kind of taken it's on the downward for sure in terms of in front of people. And I understand we've been doing this for 18 years, and that's just the reality of the situation with how media works. Mm-hmm. And so how can people support? It's just don't think that because it's not in the news that it's not happening anymore. It's happening exactly what was going on in the first parts. But I've actually been encouraged too by just hearing different fundraisers that have been happening, ones that we don't even know how they even got a hold of us or knew of us. And after 100+ days of war, where people are pretty tired on the North American side hearing about it, people are still doing it, golf tournaments and just different events that people are doing. Schools are still doing it. I think there's a school nearby there in Chilliwack at one of the middle schools that raise, and people are still doing, whether it's like $400, whether it's $40,000. It's encouraging to know that people are still actively helping and standing with Ukraine. I know the slogan was like stand with Ukraine, but it needs to be standing. Like it needs to be constant, not just the beginning part of it, because this war is very real and it continues to happen, and we need everything that we can. And that was such a cool thing, though. Actually, I think you're probably going to get to that question, but one of the cool things is that people, when they find out where they're from, because the people who travel, they're like, this person's from Canada, they are doing this there, they know that they would not be where they are in the terms of being able to defend the country that they have been without the support from Europe, from Canada, from the US. And so we're constantly being thanked on behalf of Ukrainians to people in the West, to helping Ukrainians defend their families and their homeland. And so that has been an encouraging thing, and I hope it encourages others who are listening.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'll take a moment to shout out to a few fundraisers that are happening very soon. Maybe it will be past by the time we post this, but Western Tractor in Alberta, they're hosting Fry Day, as in like French fries. So like anyone who donates gets 2 bags of French fries, which is kind of cool. So and they just sent us an email this morning saying that one donor donated $20,000, which is so cool. And then I know that there's the Chilliwack Jets are doing a golf tournament. So guys, if you're listening, that's amazing. We thank you, and it's not lost on us for sure. This is a big deal, and we really appreciate any support that is coming our way. And yeah, I mean, Chad, my last question for you was, what's been the biggest blessing? But you kind of answered that. No, my last question for you was going to be, how are you guys? But yeah. I mean, I don't want to overwhelm you with that question. Answer it how you will, and we'll leave it at that. But how are you guys?
Yeah, I was hoping you'd kind of you maybe forget about the question, but
we can if you want
not. To. I thought maybe after all the questions, if you forget the last one. It really is day by day. Some days can be like not bad. Like today's wasn't. When I say not bad, like you get through it and you're okay. And some days you're. I think Mary's said it before. You're just choking on all the pain and suffering that's in the country. So yeah, it is daily. So when you're asking like, how are you doing? It's like we're continuing to press ahead. Sometimes are harder than others. Lots of times when we come back from trips and distribution trips, yeah, it sparks up things within you that you really need to deal with in terms of like the anger and the rage that you're feeling, and you're needing to process the things that you see. And you're bringing a bag of food and items for people, but you're not coming with a roof to repair a roof for them. So you're dealing with, yes, you're bringing encouragement to them. You're bringing a bag of food, but here they have no house left, and they're living in a garage, or you're just dealing with the overwhelming need that's there that you can't fulfill. And so a lot of those, yeah, it's encouraging, but on the other sense, it's like I can't believe what people have and continue to go through, because this is not a past tense thing. This is not a, yeah, there's people who have gone through this over the last 3 months, and this is still happening in the east and southern parts of the country. So it's for myself, I just want to do everything that we can to win this war. To me, it's so it's I don't know. I'm trying to be careful with my words. It's so enraging, and
Give her. Have at her.
Yeah, you.
Let her fly.
I can't. I'm like very competitive in nature, in like sport and anything like that. And in sport that I would play, I'm a very intense individual. But that's one thing. You're playing like this sport to win, and you're playing the sport to win for your teammates. This like level of like intensity is nothing that I've experienced before, and I've had to be very careful, not to go over the line, in the sense that it's all consuming. You're in sport, maybe you're thinking through how you could have done better, you're preparing for it for like a week to play this game, and it's consuming you, you're getting prepared for it or whatever. But here it's like it's just in my nature. I am trying it to not all consume me, because there's other things that I need to making sure that I do. I need to make sure that I'm still a father to my daughter who's experiencing some of these things, that I'm still a husband to my wife who's going through some really complicated and difficult things and bearing the brunt of a lot of the stuff that's happening here. Because it's easy for me to just get locked into doing as much as we possibly can to fight this incredible evil. And so I'm trying to strike a good balance as a family. Yes, we're doing all right, all considering we're 100+ days in a crisis war area. But yeah, I am just burning. I am burning. That's also another reason why I want to go with the partners who are going right to the front lines. I want to be there to be a part of the good that's fighting this incredible evil. And so I'm not one to sit around if I have an opportunity to go out. So how am I doing? I struggle, because we're watching every day. I struggle when you see Russians advance. I struggle when you hear that sometimes the military is a little bit maybe their morale's not doing so good. So you're trying to do everything you have to contribute to it, because it's costing this country an amount that I don't know if you can put a value on it, with the amount of lives and hardships and separations and hunger and these atrocities that are happening. I can't describe it, but what is it for if they can't have their freedom to live in their own place, in their own home, in their own country, with their own thoughts that they can express? What is it for? And so, yeah, during this is an opportunity to continue to share Jesus Christ to people through what we're doing, and so I want to go where it's where people are struggling. I want to go into those high danger areas, not because I want to put my life in danger, because I want to go where people have not had the encouragement of people to go to them to provide for them. So yeah, I'm just kind of going on a little bit more, but yes, it's a very intense time that I have to kind of push myself back on, because I want to have this war won for Ukraine so desperately. Like I don't know how to best describe it, but I want the country to win, and for I'll probably just leave it at that for right now.
Well, thank you for answering that question, and thank you for being honest about that, because it's I know your competitive nature from just being back in the office and stuff, and I think that's actually a gift from God, that he's gifted you with not only that, but a very strategic thinking brain, and he's placed you where he needs you right now. And so yeah, I get that, like the angst and the desire to push through, but I think that I don't know what I think about that, but God has gifted you with that very strategic brain of yours. And so I understand why you're constantly thinking about how to better implement and how to win this. And I would hate to play against you in a sports team. That's all I would say. Okay. Well, Chad, thank you for taking the time to talk again. It's 2:00 here, so it's midnight there, right? Mm-hmm. I'm getting good at the quick time.
That's okay. I'm still working the Canadian hours for HFL stuff.
Go to bed. We're fine here. We're fine.
Eventually I will. I've not been able to stay up like I was in the very beginning. I'm just starting to run out a little bit of steam, and I've added 2, instead of 1 cup of coffee, I'm up to 2 cups of coffee during the day to keep the momentum going.
Hey, that's it. That's pretty good.
Yeah, no, it's been all right. I've been able to maintain it, but yeah, it fluctuates, and that's why I think prayer, even if we're doing good today, tomorrow we could get some really difficult news. So even if people who feel prompted at a certain time to pray for us don't squelch that prompting, please do so, because it could be very much the time where we very much need it, or needing to make a pretty big decision on something. So I know if it's not daily, that's totally cool. But if you feel the prompting to pray for us, we would appreciate you. Everyone doing that for us. So.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, I'll let you go. Thanks again.
No problem.
And see you later. That's a wrap.
Bye, Jess.
Thanks for listening to What in the World, where we seek to educate and inspire. Here at Hungry for Life, we are passionate about your group having a global impact in eradicating needless suffering. For more information, head over to our website at hungryforlife.org. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you may listen to podcasts. Tune in every other week for another conversation about what is happening at Hungry for Life.